MDM4U 6.0 Introduction to Probability. So in this chapter, we're going to be reviewing some fundamental concepts such as fractions, percents, and decimals, as well as many other of the counting techniques that we've learned in the permutations and combinations chapters. Starting with the fundamentals. So this is a helpful fact, saying decimal numbers using fractions. If we remember the terms or place names after the decimal, it starts off with the tenths. Notice that's with a THS, meaning it's a fraction of a whole. Hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, and millionths, and so on. So we can take advantage of this place name system in the decimal system to change from decimals to fractions. So 0.3 can also be referred to as 3/10ths, which directly translates to a fraction, 3 out of 10. Similarly, 0.5 is 5/10ths, is another way of saying that. But when we include two decimal places, 0.50 can also be expressed as 50 hundredths because we have tenths and then hundredths. So depending on the number of decimal places used, we can refer to the place name to help get a fraction. This is 50 out of 100. So all of these are fractions representing portions of a whole, 0.45 being 45 hundredths, and 0.007 is 7 thousandths. So this helps explain, for example, that 0.50 and 0.5 are equivalent in value because if we were to take 5/10ths and multiply it by 10 on the numerator, 10 on the denominator, that would be equivalent to this 50 out of 100. Next, let's remember that percent is a rate per hundred, cent in French, meaning 100. So therefore, if we have a decimal, for example, 0.25, this could be expressed as a fraction out of 100 if we do the following. Multiply by 100 over 100, and that would look like 25 over 100. Remember that we multiply across the numerator, 0.25 times 100, and then across the denominator. If this is a decimal number, we can make it a fraction by putting it over top of 1. So 1 times 100 is 100. And therefore we have a rate per 100, which can be replaced by this percent. So keep in mind that probability can be expressed as a fraction, percent, or a decimal. And that when we're using the symbol, that means exactly this, that it is over 100. Now, that being said, what we're going to do is look at some conversions, and I'm going to let you try some on your own. We're going to start off with this situation. We have fractions, and we want to move it to a decimal instead. And here's that situation. We have 7 out of 16. So take a second to try to figure out what that is as a decimal. 3, 2, 1. 7 divided by 16. Anytime that we have a fraction, we can just use that division symbol, and we end up with a decimal equivalent. Now, sometimes they terminate. Sometimes these decimals have a finite number of digits. If there's ever repetition, what you can do is write a line on top of a digit, such as if it was 1/3, that would be 0.33 repeated. We could just write 0.3 with a line on top. Next, fraction to a percent. So if we have 7/8 as a fraction, to get this as a percent, what would that be? 3, 2, 1. If you take the fraction 7 divided by 8 and then multiplied by 100, that will give you the percentage. Notice that this is just like multiplying by 1. 100% is 100 over 100, which is just 1, and that doesn't change the value when multiplying. So that's 87.5%. All right, we've completed all of the conversions for fractions. Let's go to decimals. To go from a decimal to a fraction, let's take 0.42 and convert this. What would that be? 3, 2, 1. If we remember our place names, that's 42 hundredths. So 42 out of 100. And yes, this can be reduced using a common factor. They're both divisible by 2. 21 over 50. Now, we need to convert from decimal to percent. So 0.6 is our decimal, and we're converting that to a percent. 3, 2, 1. So we can take the decimal version and multiply it by 100%, meaning multiply by 100 is like moving the decimal place over 2 spaces. That's the advantage of the decimal system. And then that is a rate per 100 because we had 100 divided by 100. We didn't change the value of that decimal at all. So notice the following. Another way of thinking of this is 6/10. And if you want a percent, which is a rate per 100, 6/10 is equivalent to 60 out of 100. And that can be done mentally quite easily. Last example, from percent to decimal. So percent to decimal. We have 9%. And what is this as a decimal? And again, those decimal place names are very helpful for converting. We can take the decimal and divide by 100, which is the same as moving that decimal place over 2 spaces. In this case, that would be 0.09. You could think of it as the decimal place names. 9% is 9 per 100, so that's 9/100ths, or 0.09. Next, percent to fraction. If you have 32%, we know that percent is a fraction per 100. And then we've done an example of each. Hopefully that's something that is a strong skill at this point. Good luck with these homework questions.